24시간 불이 꺼지지 않는 나라. 감당할 수 있겠니?
Coming up on Arirang News, South Korea and Africa will launch a critical minerals dialogue for a stable supply. Also, they agreed to bolster strategic cooperation with the leaders adopting a joint statement at the first Korea-Africa summit. President Yoon has signed a motion that officially and fully suspends the Inter-Korean Tension Reduction Military Pact signed in 2018, following the North's latest provocative actions. The government has lifted its ban on hospitals, accepting the resignation letter submitted by junior doctors over 3 months ago at the start of the medical dispute. However, not many interns and residents have returned to work yet. Good evening. It's 9 p.m. here in Seoul. Thank you for joining us on Arirang News. We start with South Korea's first ever multilateral summit with countries from Africa. It's the largest global gathering yet under the Yoon administration, hosting delegations from 48 African nations. Under the theme of the future we make together, the leaders have discussed their vision of shared growth, sustainability, and solidarity, and agreed to expand cooperation in many fields, including key minerals. Our correspondent Woo Soo-young leads us off.
South Korea and African nations have agreed to establish a critical minerals dialogue and increase cooperation on infrastructure, digital technology, and food security. This came in a joint statement following South Korea's first standalone summit with African countries on Tuesday, attended by 48 member states of the African Union. President Yoon and African Union Chair President Mohamed El Ghazouani of Mauritania highlighted the 7 major areas of cooperation under the theme of shared growth, sustainability, and solidarity.
한 아프리카 관계의 새로운 장을 열게 된 오늘 회의에서 참석자들은 함께 만드는 미래를 위한 구체적 방안들을 심도 있게 논의했습니다.
We all understand that Korea can offer a lot, especially when it comes to the experience of development, human capital development, and transition to digital economy. In these ways, we have a lot to learn, and we were able to learn the growth potential of Africa.
First, to promote trade and investment, the two sides agreed to pursue an economic partnership agreement and a trade and investment promotion framework to promote more corporate exchanges. Seoul will also aim to expand its official development assistance to Africa to $10 billion by 2030 and provide some $14 billion of financing for Korean companies to tap into the market of some 1.4 billion people. South Korea and Africa also signed MOUs on building infrastructure, including roads, rails, and ports, and increasing the digital capacity of African youth through educational and vocational programs. They also penned deals to strengthen cooperation on food security, sustainable farming, and health infrastructure. And one key deal they struck was to establish a dialogue channel on critical minerals, which are core components for advanced digital products like semiconductors, South Korea's main export. As of 2022, South Korea has only 36 mineral mines to back the sector, compared to the United States' more than 1,900 and Japan's 134, according to the Federation of Korean Industries. Amid various regional and global challenges to peace and security, the two sides agreed to increase cooperation in counter-terrorism and humanitarian support, as well as their solidarity at the UN Security Council, where South Korea and 3 African countries are serving non-permanent terms. Also, the two sides emphasized the international community's push for the complete, verifiable, and irreversible denuclearization of the Korean Peninsula. To further develop their cooperation, they agreed to increase bilateral exchanges between governments and businesses, as well as in culture, sports, and academia. To ensure continuity of their agreements, South Korea and Africa will hold a foreign ministers meeting in 2 years' time and establish high-level consultative bodies on economic cooperation and agriculture. Marking a new chapter in Korea-Africa cooperation, the summit creates an intersection between Korea's vision of becoming a global pivotal state, a responsible contributor to world peace and prosperity, and Agenda 2063, Africa's blueprint for sustainable development with the goal of becoming a global powerhouse. 오수영, Arirang News.
Diplomatic and economic exchanges have long been active between South Korea and African nations. President Yoon and the participating African leaders say this first Korea-Africa summit paves the way for lasting friendship between the two regions in the years to come. For a closer look, here's our Kim Do-yeon.
At the first Korea-Africa summit, with 48 African nations represented in South Korea, President Yoon opened what he called a new chapter of friendship, saying that this summit confirms African nations as critical partners of South Korea, while noting that the two sides have been there for each other during tough times.
1950년 6.25 전쟁이 발발하자 아프리카는 파병과 물자 지원을 통해 대한민국의 자유민주주의 수호에 기여해 주었습니다. 1950년대부터 70년대까지 많은 아프리카 국가들이 차례로 독립을 이룩하면서 우리와의 수교는 더 활발히 이루어졌습니다.
He also noted that the summit opens a new chapter in relations. African Union Chair and Mauritania's President Mohamed Ould Ghazouani opened the response from African nations, showing his hope for enhanced cooperation.
I believe that the very reason African nations are attending this summit is because African countries are expressing their steadfast trust and gratitude towards South Korea.
Rwandan President Paul Kagame said, quote, "South Korea is a global pivotal state. Africa is a global pivotal continent. This summit should have happened sooner. South Korea needs to share its experience of success, while Africa has a lot of must-learns from South Korea." And the Central African Republic president said, "We request South Korea to develop human resources for the conservation and development of Africa's vast forests. We hope for mutual growth between Korea and Africa through decarbonization." This two-day event was held just outside of Seoul in Goyang, Gyeonggi-do Province at Kintex, the largest exhibition facility in South Korea. This is the biggest multilateral summit that the Yoon administration has hosted. It was much anticipated after President Yoon himself announced the plan to host the inaugural summit back in late 2022. With a number of participants, just the welcoming and greeting of all leaders took more than an hour in the morning. Covering the summit were reporters from all around the world, with different languages being heard at the media center to show the diversity this summit comes with. Following the morning session, the leaders gathered for a photo shoot, lunch, closing ceremony, and the joint press conference. Kim Do-yeon, Arirang News.
Also at the Korea-Africa summit, media outlets from several different African countries showed great interest in the possible outcomes of the summit. Our Park Gun-woo takes a closer look.
I'm here on the first day of the historic 2024 Korea-Africa Summit held here in Korea. The event not only drew attention domestically, but also from dozens of media outlets in Africa. Let's get their take on the event.
Us creating a relation in terms of probably exchange, trade, and also in terms of companies, Korean companies setting up in Africa and especially in Eswatini, so that we can benefit in terms of creating jobs and obviously innovation and things like that.
He added the combination of Korea's advanced technology and Eswatini's various mineral resources could help their country develop. A media representative from Malawi also shared the same sentiment, but mentioned potential cooperation in tourism and agriculture.
And another aspect is tourism. Our country is looking forward to have as many tourists as possible coming from different countries, including Korea. Most of our farmers are still using the traditional ways of farming, advanced equipment like tractors that we know for sure that Korea does have this kind of modern equipment, agricultural equipment. So we are looking forward into those aspects of saying that Korea can help us to invest in these sectors of agriculture.
He added that the Korea-Africa Summit should act as a place where real deals between Korea and African countries actually are promoted. Park Gon-woo, Arirang News.
Africa, a continent brimming with enormous potential, boasts over 1 billion-person market and abundant natural resources. Our Moon Hae-ryun has the details on further partnerships to explore between Korea and Africa.
Africa is an extremely diverse continent with a wide range of low, middle and high-income economies. The World Bank dubs Sub-Saharan Africa the world's largest free trade area, with a 1.2 billion-person market, as well as being rich in natural resources. This is what makes the continent an attractive partner for economic cooperation, as the issue of secure supply chains for raw materials becomes more and more important in South Korea. During the 4th Korea-Africa Forum back in 2016, both sides agreed to enhance their economic cooperation, as well as collaboration in other sectors such as science and technology, human resources, and fostering the younger generation. But over the past 10 years, progress has been somewhat stunted.
It only accounts for about 1 to 2% of Korean exports and 1 to 1.5% of Korean imports. And the big reason for that is that African GDP as a region is still very small.
Africa's global share of GDP is around 5%, while South Korea's accounts for 1.6%. This means that the GDP of the whole region equates to just 3 times that of South Korea. The low GDP combined with the geographical distance has made trade difficult, along with the political instability in certain areas that have made it a risky region to do business with. However, the International Monetary Fund has set optimistic forecasts for economic growth in the sub-Saharan region, predicting that this will rise from 3.4% last year to 3.8% this year after 4 turbulent years.
We have to remember that the African continent's share of population is about 18%. So they have a vast room to grow, and they are less developed, so they have a lot of demand for infrastructure investment. And in order to make infrastructure investment, they will have a lot of demand for financing.
South Korea and Africa also share a major issue affecting many regions around the world: global warming, which affects crops and other natural resources. Consumer prices in South Korea are skyrocketing with large price hikes for fresh produce, while the World Meteorological Organization reported that more than $8.5 billion worth of economic damages were wrought in Africa by climate-related hazards in 2022. With this shared interest in tackling global issues and untapped potential in trade and infrastructure investment yet to be explored, the summit, talks and business forum are expected to boost economic cooperation in the future. Moon Hae-ryun, Arirang News.
South Korea has officially suspended the entirety of the 2018 Inter-Korean military agreement. The decision came amid North Korea's recent series of provocations. Our North Korean affairs correspondent Kim Jung-sil reports.
President Yoon Suk-yeol has signed the motion that was passed by the cabinet meeting on Tuesday morning to suspend all clauses of the 2018 Inter-Korean military agreement.
The government has decided to suspend all effectiveness of the September 19th military agreement until mutual trust between the two Koreas is restored, effective Tuesday, June 4th, as of 3 p.m., after the decision of the cabinet and the president's approval.
The 2018 Inter-Korean military agreement was aimed at diffusing military tensions and preventing accidental military conflict at the border. But military officials, including South Korea's defense minister, have argued that the agreement compromises South Korean military readiness.
Since signing the agreement, North Korea has deliberately and repeatedly conducted violations and provocations, including firing artillery shells off the coast, firing missiles beyond the NLL, firing at guard posts, and infiltrating with small unmanned aerial vehicles.
Back in November, North Korea declared a virtual termination of the September 19 military agreement. This came after Seoul partially suspended a clause on aerial reconnaissance following North Korea's launch of a military spy satellite the night before.
Despite North Korea's repeated violations and provocations, our military has continued to abide by the agreement. However, since failing to launch the military reconnaissance satellites back on May 27th, the North has launched missiles, sent large-scale balloons carrying waste, and jammed GPS systems, gravely threatening the safety of our people and causing property damage.
The deputy minister added that the North Korean regime is solely responsible for the turn of events and warned of a firm response should the North engage in further provocations. With the suspension in effect, the deputy minister hinted of the possible resumption of military drills near the military demarcation line and the Northwest Islands. Such drills had been restricted by the agreement. Kim Jung-sil, Arirang News.
South Korea and the U.S. will hold their third Nuclear Consultative Group meeting in Seoul next week. South Korea's defense ministry said on Tuesday that the session will be led by South Korea's Deputy Defense Minister for Policy, Jo Chang-rae, and Principal U.S. Deputy Assistant Secretary of Defense for Space Policy, Vipin Naran. They'll discuss the details of their shared strategy to deter North Korea's nuclear threat. Shifting gears, South Korea continues to see its inflation ease to below 3% in May. But prices of fruits skyrocketed again, with pears rising by around 120% and oil prices hitting their highest in 16 months. Our An Sung-jin brings us the latest figures.
Inflation in South Korea is showing signs of slowing down, yet prices of fruits and oil still remain high. Data from Statistics Korea released on Tuesday show the country's consumer price index, a key gauge of inflation, had stabilized year-on-year at 2.7% for May. This is the lowest since last July. Inflation has been hovering in the 2 to slightly above 3% range for the past month. However, fruit prices have jumped by nearly 40% compared to 2023. Apples cost around 80% more, while pears cost around 120% more. It's the highest year-on-year rise for pears ever. Oil prices have also been hiked to their highest in 16 months. During a ministerial economics meeting on Tuesday, Finance Minister Choi Sang-mok pledged to reduce the burden on people by extending import tariff cuts for fresh produce, including 28 fruits, into the second half of the year.
With inflation remaining high, difficulties in the livelihoods of people continue. All departments in the government will do their best to stabilize the economy.
Core inflation, which excludes these volatile items such as food and energy prices, rose by 2.2%, showing a relatively stabilized flow. The finance minister noted that without external shock factors, inflation should stabilize to the lower to mid 2% range in the latter half of this year. An Sung-jin, Arirang News.
Amid the ongoing medical dispute, the government has announced measures that will ultimately allow hospitals to accept the resignation letter submitted by trainee doctors. However, as of yet, no significant movement has been seen by the junior doctors. Our Choi Soo-hyung has the latest.
The Ministry of Health announced on Tuesday that it will leave the order prohibiting the acceptance of resignation letters submitted by residents to their hospital directors. All orders being given to residents will be halted the same day.
Starting Tuesday, the government is withdrawing orders for hospital directors to accept resignations and for residents to return to work and maintain patient treatments. This will allow residents to decide individually whether to return to their hospitals.
It added that in over 3 months of operation by its emergency response system, changes were inevitable to entice the return of the residents and to reduce the fatigue of medical staff caring for the trainee doctors. Currently, over 13,000 residents have left their hospital positions to protest the government's medical reforms, including the expansion of the medical school quota. They now have the option to look for work elsewhere if they don't want to return to their regional hospital. The government stated that it was time to allow the residents to resign as they wished, enabling them to continue their training at any hospital since the medical school quota expansion has been finalized. Only about 8% of the residents have gone back to the hospital so far, but the ministry added that it hopes many more will return. However, the majority of the trainee doctors are holding firm in their stance not to return to work. Immediately after the announcement, Park Dan, the head of the Korean Intern Residents Association, posted on Facebook that nothing had changed. Also, hospitals have doubts about whether residents in essential medical services such as surgery, obstetrics and gynecology will return. Many residents don't want to due to the burden of medical lawsuits and the relatively harsh training conditions they have to endure. Meanwhile, the Korean Medical Association, which had warned of a bigger fight, is holding a vote until Friday on a nationwide strike, including private protest doctors. Medical professors at Seoul National University have also announced that they will conduct a vote on a further strike. The ministry stated that if the residents return, working conditions will be different from before. Minister Cho said that returning residents will have an adjustment process for the training gap to ensure they can take the specialist exam, while additional support will be given to residents who remained at work and did not join the collective resignations. It's said that the residents could focus more on their training under the new measures that include amending the medical law to remove the pressure of possible lawsuits and reducing their continuous working hours. Choi Hyung, Arirang News.
While the whole country is clear today, early summer heat continues everywhere. The temperature in Seoul rose to 29 degrees Celsius. Usually the daytime temperature is around 27 degrees at this time of year, but it's already exceeded that. The temperature in Seoul is expected to rise a little more in the coming days. The early heat will be at its peak tomorrow. Seoul is expected to reach 31 degrees during the daytime. As the temperature rises quickly during the day, the atmosphere becomes unstable and there will be frequent showers. It will rain in many areas tomorrow except the Seoul metropolitan area. On Thursday, rain is forecast to be in Gangwon-do province and Jeju Island. It will rain this weekend as well. Please track the latest weather information carefully. Tomorrow, Seoul will start off at 18 degrees, Chuncheon and Daegu 14 degrees. It will move up to 31 degrees in Seoul, Chuncheon and Daejeon 30 degrees. Early heat will gradually ease off a little with rain on Thursday. That's all for Korea. Here are the weather conditions around the world. Well, that is all for this newscast tonight. Thank you for watching. We'll be back with the latest news at 9 a.m. with New Day at Arirang. Good night.
Lotte takes a new leap beyond its boundaries.